Welcome back to Sun, Sand, and Soul. Josh Tomey with David Haber. We're joined today by Russell Galbut. Russell, welcome to the studio and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Great.
Have some fun.
Great to have you. Apparently, you've been doing this real estate thing for a little while. So would love to hear for our audience, for our listeners, a little more about your history for those that don't know, and a little bit about what you're doing now in particular, because there's obviously been some changes over the years.
There has been. I'm going on 50 years where I built my first condominium on Miami Beach at 1612 Jefferson Avenue, and it's still standing today. I like to tell people that I filed a 7-page permit application on a Monday and got it approved on a Thursday.
Those were the good old days.
Those are the good old days. Today, it would take about 700 pages.
And 7 months.
And about 7 months to get a permit. What a difference.
With a lot of guys like you charging a lot of money to make all that happen.
Not me.
Not him. It's these expediters. And it's really quite an interesting racket. Now, other cities, have self-certification, have peer review certification, but that's certainly not in many municipalities in Dade County. And we also have a county that, to further complicate things, we have a department called Durham that doesn't exist in any other county in the state of Florida. So you sort of have to figure out what the hell is going on here.
Right.
So that's a whole thing. But
let's start how you started in Miami Beach.
No, that's not how I started. When I started in Miami Beach is, look, I was born and raised in the beach. My grandparents came, started visiting in 26, moved here in 29.
That's
1926. Yeah, right. 1929. And
for those young listeners of podcasts, we're talking about a century ago.
That's true. It's a century ago.
Just before you graduated high school.
Right. Well, Russell graduated Beach High before me.
Yeah. No, I did. So I went to Cornell in 1970. But I'm born and raised on the beach. My grandparents were renowned for their charitable giving and their love of people. My father was a commissioner, a vice mayor, loved the community. Was a military officer. He raised 4 sons.
Was that Captain Hyman?
That's Captain Hyman.
Captain Hyman Galbut.
And he was a pretty famous guy in his own rights. He spent quite a few years in the war, went in early, graduated Fort Schuyler in 1939 before we entered the war, but knew that we were going to enter the war. Came down and flew some Navy planes in Homestead, the first ones. Wow. Was really an outstanding naval officer. And he raised 4 sons with a lot of discipline, a lot of love, but belief in America and strong determination to give back to our community.
And you have one brother who's a lawyer. You're a graduate of law school, a lawyer, and you have 2 doctors?
Two doctors.
2 doctors, 2 lawyers. A Jewish parent's dream.
It is a Jewish parent's dream.
We're just missing the accountant to figure out what to do with the money.
I'm actually a CPA also.
Oh, all right.
So,
he's doubling down.
The truth is I never really practiced because, I started out, coming from very humble beginnings. My parents never had any money and my grandparents never had any money. So I really did want to become wealthy. And the first key to becoming wealthy is wanting to become wealthy, because it doesn't happen by luck. I can tell you that. You don't win a lottery ticket. You have to really...
it's hard work.
Hard work. That's the way to do it. And you have to be willing to take some risks, and you're going to have disappointments. But like in life, you have to make your disappointments little and your wins big.
Well, and you got to learn from your mistakes too.
You got to learn from your mistakes. And thank God we started quite a few different companies. One of them that I'm really most proud of is Crescent Heights. In Crescent Heights, we've made every mistake there is to make in real estate. I'm the first one to say that. But thank God we didn't make it twice, and we didn't make it 3 times. And we have lessons learned in that organization. There's 2,600 lessons learned, over a period of over 35 years. So
you started out with conversions, right?
We started out with conversions. We became America's largest conversion company. And we did.
For listeners, that means taking an apartment building and converting it into a condominium.
It's more than that, because we took office buildings, converted to condominiums. We took condominiums in broken buildings and converted that to multifamily. We took residence and converted it to offices. So we've done it all. I mean, it's just when you take a use of that's been existing in a property for 100 years and you change it, you create a new space, a new magical space. So an example of that would be 25 Broad or or the Raffaella Hotel, where we take a 100-year-old building that has great bones.
That's in New York.
That's in New York or Chicago, or anywhere else, because we've done it in Philadelphia, everywhere. And you give it additional purpose, important purpose, and you keep the historical nature of it, and you really appreciate that. So we like to refer to it as an opportunity to give new life to something that has classical bones and classical beauty.
How did you team up with Sonny Khan to Crescent Heights?
Sonny is the most charitable, giving individual you could ever imagine. He was doing condo conversions in L.A., and the first time I met him was in L.A., and we became friends. And then when he came to Miami Beach, he said, look, I'm coming to Miami Beach. I want to do these projects. I need some help. Do you want to come in with me? And that was in the late 80s, 1988. And we were introduced by a mutual friend who's now passed on, Judah Hertz. And it's been really sort of a love affair since then. So I think the smartest thing Sonny did was come to America from Israel, because he came with 50 cents.
Wow.
And he's really quite an interesting story.
That's amazing.
And he raised an amazing family with an amazing wife. So, and he's been a contributor to our community. There's no charity that doesn't know Sonny Khan. So that was a wonderful relationship. And then literally just a few years after we teamed up, I called Bruce, who was working as a lawyer at Sullivan and Cromwell. Bruce Menon. And I said to Bruce, I'm working too hard. You got to come down and help me. Well, the truth is that his mother was like a second mother to me, Miriam Menon. She ran the tag agency on Miami Beach, but she was my father's sister. And she was the kindest, gentlest woman you would ever want to meet in your life. And my father, as I said to you, was a military officer, a creator of men. And, he'd be in jail if he'd be today, because he used to beat us up, not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, but if we misbehaved, we'd be thrown out of the house physically.
He kept you flying straight.
He kept us compliance. Yeah. So, so she was always the one who would protect me. And so I had a love of my Aunt Miriam that was second to none. And she really wanted Bruce in Miami. So I called him up and I said, listen, you got to stop this nonsense at Sullivan and Cromwell and come to Miami and be part of Crescent Heights. And maybe I won't have to work so hard. And then when he came down to South Florida, I had to work harder. I didn't quite realize that or get that. But we had a lot of fun together.
But, that's one of the things I find about successful people. The more successful, the harder they work.
It's so true.
They just work harder because they know what it takes to succeed. And instead of letting up, they just continue because they're so driven, whether it's in charity, philanthropy, or whether it's in business, or whether it's with family, they're driven and they drive those around them. I can tell you, I had a driven father. You knew my dad and my uncle.
Right.
And, driven people drive those around them.
Well, the sports analogy rings true. We talk about sports leaders. You talk about people who have tasted that success, and success begets success. And I got to imagine in the development space, it's got to feel a lot of the same way. Absolutely.
I'll tell you, it's been a wonderful life, and the truth is that those people who stay active live longer. There's no question about it. And that's both physical and mental.
Sure.
Right.
Mental acuity is so important, and to mentally challenge yourself. One of the things that I love to do is I learn every day. I try to be as smart as I can be when it comes to computers, when it comes to everything, because to be intellectually challenged is really what life is all about. And I try to play ball every week. So sometimes I'm more successful, but
play ball.
Yeah. I play racquetball. I have an incredible partner named Aaron Tandy. I love him dearly.
We know Aaron very well.
Yeah. And as long as Aaron will have me, even though I'm getting older, I'm his partner.
Where are you playing?
I play at the JCC.
At the J.
Yeah.
The Galbut J.
The Galbut J. We gave the enabling gift for that, over $2 million, which was a wonderful thing to do. I grew up in that community, and I grew up playing ball on the streets. We didn't have any places to go or JCCs to go to.
When you and I were kids, your mother called out and said, it's dinner time, get inside.
Exactly.
Until then, we were out playing.
Until then, we were out playing on the street, playing baseball or basketball or whatever.
Right.
It was just a
different world.
A different world. And today, it was also a little bit safer then too, because you never locked your doors. Everybody knew each other. You had the police officer, the nurse living next to you. I mean, it was a community that was really a community of people. from all ages.
And everybody's parents were watching you.
Russell,
everybody's parents were watching.
How much do you carry that sensibility now into what you do, this idea of creation of community? I mean, we've had a lot of developers on the show. We work with a lot of developers. That comes up a lot, and it's not an easy thing to pull off, that sense of creating community.
The community is everything. I like to say, why do we outperform our comp set? And we do. Okay. If you look at Forma, we just completed and are occupying now. Our rents there are outperforming our comp set by 20%. Okay. And how do we do it? I tell everybody we spend more money on architecture, spend more money on interior design. We spend more money on art. We have an incredible art collector, Jason, who is so picky and so classical. I mean, you go into the building and you see the art there. It's just incredible. And it's all because of Jason. He also picked the pedestrian bridge on 5th Street, Jason.
On Miami Beach.
On Miami Beach, Jason Galbut. He's an incredible art selector and art historian. He knows so much. He went to the Slade in London. We're very, very happy to have him. And then we have more amenities and more sensible amenities that people want to use.
So explain what you mean by sensible amenities.
Sensible amenities is basically saying, how do we cater to the people within our community? What do they want? So for example, we would have a golf simulator that turns into a baseball simulator. We have lots of social rooms. We have quiet rooms. I mean, it's sort of hard to explain. We have a swimming pools plus 4 of them that are magnificent, 2 jacuzzis.
And which property are we talking about?
We're talking about Forma.
Forma on Biscayne.
On the Forma. You have to see it to believe it. It is by far the best multifamily ever built in Dade County. By far. It's because the energy went in. But even with all those things, even with more architecture, more interior design, more art, more amenities, it wouldn't reach its level without it being a true community. And that community is developed by the way we manage the properties and what we put into those properties. So more people are working from home. We have a whole work area within all of our properties today. But how do you build a community? You build a community by, number one, that we do is by our app. We have an app that basically tells everybody what they need in the building. If you need groceries, you need this. We also have a Whole Foods downstairs. So that caters to the people. One thing I found out about Whole Foods, which is really excellent, and now we're building our second Whole Foods, is that young women, especially young women who are single, love to be close to a Whole Foods. That's their way of getting their groceries, and that's their way of getting their meals. And, it's a funny thing. It's been like this for ages, that when you have beautiful young women that live within your property, you get plenty of other men and other couples that will want to live in that property.
See, Josh, we're not going to touch that.
I was going to say, this is we're teeing up questions here that we really our producers want us to stay far away from. But
stay far away.
But it's a good
point. It is a good point. And what happens when you have young, athletic, in shape, hardworking people is they attract their own.
Sure, right? It's magnetic.
There's no building that has a gym like ours, men's and ladies changing rooms, indoor and outdoor.
Well, I'm glad they have separate changing rooms.
Indoor.
Yes. Meet me at the Whole Foods, not the changing room. That's Forma's new marketing line.
So if for example, at Forma, if you want to play pickleball, but you don't have a partner, you can put on the app, hey, I'm Johnny in 2107. I need to play pickleball. Is there anybody out there who would like to play with me? And you'd be surprised at the responses, because that's creating a community.
I'm Johnny. Do you want to play with me?
See, we just said we're avoiding it, and you're just walking right into that.
I couldn't help it.
So, Russell, I got to ask, how much of that is an organic process versus an academic process? I mean, I know a lot of developers, look at demography, they look at rate, they look at all these things to say, well, this is who our clientele is really going to be. But I got to imagine after all these years, there's also a feel to it, that you also understand there's a sensibility you're trying to capture. So I'm curious how that gets divided between that instinct versus what's on paper.
Well, first of all, let me tell you, there's a never-ending search for excellence within everything we do. Everything we do, we're looking to be the best at what we do always. And then experience tells a lot, it's okay to make a mistake once, but to make it twice, that's bad. To make it 3 times, you should be shot. So, we do, and we are under a never ending search for excellence. And there's nothing that we wouldn't do, but it's based upon one concept. And it's an important concept, is that the building has to work with paper and pen, because if the building doesn't work with paper and pen, it's not going to work with cement and concrete. It's just not. You have to take a disciplined approach to it. And it has to work in paper and in writing. And today we have all the tools for us. It's not like it was.
When you say paper and pen, do you mean economically or
economically,
architecturally?
Economically, architecturally, every which way. It has
culturally, everything.
Culturally, you have to say to yourself, are you building something special? That's really the question. We don't want to build anything that's not magical. It's too late in my life. I only want to build magic. And that's what's so important. If it's, when you're young and you're in search of being wealthy or being okay, then you'll do anything. Okay. But once you reach a certain level,
you're looking at legacy at that point.
You're looking at legacy, and you're looking at, how do I leave this place a better place?
Right.
It's not just the business. Although for me, I am a workaholic, but it's also,
I can attest to that because I get text messages at 5 a.m.
Yeah. That's me. I'm up every morning at 4:30 and
you're working.
And I'm working. Those are my best hours.
I was going to say, same thing. It was early morning hours.
Early morning hours, 4:30 to 8:30. I do my emails, get set for the day. And then I know I have meetings during the day and I have podcasts during the day, which I didn't have before. This is a relatively new concept, but you know what? It's fun.
It is fun.
It's fun. I'm actually a social loving individual.
You sure are. I've been to meetings and parties with Russell, and he loves interacting with people, meeting new people, talking about his ideas, loves it.
Well, Russell just set me up for a great transition to talk a little bit about 14 Rock, because I think the podcast sensibility, these amenities that are really now becoming more of a functional part of life and work are getting more and more common and prevalent. And clearly that development is really taking it to yet another level.
That I'm so happy you mentioned 14 Rock, because
where is 14 Rock?
14 Rock is on 14th Street, and it's right in the heart of the Arts and Entertainment District. Okay. And it's got an incredible view corridor looking at the Signature Bridge and looking at the Port of Miami.
That's going to be some bridge when it's finished.
Oh my God. It's going to be fantastic.
It's going to be like Boston's suspension bridge.
Right. The Zakin Bridge, right?
Yeah. It's taken a long time, but it's going to well be worth it. And it's the only signature bridge we have in the state of Florida. So, you talk about, believing in yourself and having faith. We bought the property on the south side of that bridge and on the north side of that bridge. And people don't really remember, but it was a real challenge. No one knew that bridge would ever get built. I mean, we had to go to Tallahassee quite a few times.
Well, you guys had a fight to get a signature bridge because they just wanted to put back a regular bridge.
a regular highway.
Right. And Miami deserved, with all of our architecture and all of our emphasis on architecture, we deserved a signature bridge.
Well, what a missed opportunity that would have been.
It was ridiculous.
Well, they had a backtrack. They had a moonwalk backwards because the people from Miami said, no way, we're not doing a regular bridge.
Exactly. And we were fortunate enough that we had leadership in the city of Miami that took a great stand. Art did a great job, and they have a fellow by the name of Frey underneath him, and the whole team. It really was a coalescence of the entire community and the surrounding neighborhood that came out and said, "Hey guys, you really need to do a better job on this bridge, because otherwise FDOT would have just done a super highway and it would have been ridiculous."
Right.
And it also gave us the opportunity to connect communities, okay? To connect Overtown with the Arts and Entertainment District and do this incredible park. Really, it's 35-acre park that's outstanding that will be directly underneath the Signature Bridge.
Wow.
So 14 Rock is not only going to rock with everything that it has inside it, because it has more architectural design, more interior design. I mean, we had Maud do that one. It's just incredibly designed beautifully.
How many stories?
It's 32 stories. 32 stories is now on sale at our sales office. And, I should mention this because it's sort of interesting. That's the first sales office that we actually put a podcast room in. And it's really amazing how these sales offices are advancing really, really quickly. So we have a whole new sales process, and it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because we have brokers from all over the world that visit us. And we give them the opportunity to use the podcast room to do a podcast talking about 14 Rock and sending it to all of their customers, whether they're from Brazil, Argentina.
So you're using the podcast format and using it for sale purposes.
For sale purposes. It's the most incredible thing ever. So, and you know why? Because people naturally are social. They want to hear about other people's stories. They want to learn about what life is all about. And you know what? Unfortunately, we're all married to our computers. It's a different generation.
Right. My wife listens to crime podcasts all day long.
She doesn't listen to his, but she listens to the crime.
She will not listen to Sun, Sand, and Soul, but if you have a good murder, she's all ears while she's walking her 6 mile walk.
Hopefully the two none shall meet, right? I mean, that's
You know what Lisa said the other day? I said, why won't you listen to our podcast? And she said, I listen to you all day long. The last thing I want to do is go on my walk and hear your voice in my ears.
And not to take Lisa's side, but all right.
It makes sense. Josh, it makes sense. It really does. So let me tell you about 14 Rock. So 14 Rock is 32 stories. It's got an incredible swimming pool on the roof. And that whole community is coming together. Okay. It's the arts and entertainment community. It's going to be fabulous. And I got to tell you, it took years in the making, but we finally got the CRA extended. And
so explain what CRA is to our podcast listeners.
The CRAs is a opportunity. It's a reinvestment act. It's a community reinvestment act. And it's been used in the state of Florida to rebuild communities that have been decimated for one reason or another, economically, socially, whatever it is. And it's a very smart concept. And what it says basically is that this community is so lost that what we're going to do is we're going to capture the amount of real estate tax that the community gives today, and we're going to lock it at that level for a period of time, whether it's 20 years, 30 years. And in that period of time, all of the additional taxes will go into that community by itself.
And it doesn't go to the entire city.
And it doesn't go to the entire city.
Area.
Right. By the way, you should know whatever you give to the county, they will use. You'll never get it back.
Well,
whatever you give to the city, they will use.
I don't know that any government ever has given back and written a check to.
Yeah, we don't need it this year. Take it back.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't. That doesn't work. So that CRA community, was set to go out, and thank God it was extended in the time frame because Tallahassee is going to close all of these CRAs at the end of their duration. So that got extended, which means that they had more money to finish the deal with the school board. And that school board deal is the most important deal the children of Dade County can have if they're in public school.
So one of the features of your developments is improving the schools in the area. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, it's not improving the schools in the area. What I was going to say to you is that the CRA having more money means that the entire area will get done. And they just won through the work of Andrew Frey and the whole team of Miami people. They just won $60+ million to finish the park. So they had $22 million before. They have $85 million to finish this park, which leads right into Bayside Park, right into Bayside Park. So when you look at what has been created there, you have the Arts Center across the street, the ballet, the Frost Museum of Science. You have the PAM.
Got it all.
You have it all, the PAM Museum. And then you have Bayside, and then you have Bayside Shops and Bayside Park. You have it all. It's the most incredible. And then you have World Center.
And you can walk. It's
walkability. You have World Center. So what happened in Miami, let me tell you, it really started 20 years ago. 20 years ago when the leadership of Miami decided that
we needed an arts district.
We needed an infrastructure. Okay. And they started.
Thank you, Adrienne Arsht.
Thank you.
Really, she was amazing. She is amazing.
They're all amazing. Frost is amazing, and his wife is amazing, and Related is amazing. George Perez is amazing. But it was everybody coming together. The arena. That arena is incredible. 275 events a year, and you could not have found a better place for the train station. Because that World Center's on fire because of that train station. Go down and see how many cranes are there. There's a whole community being developed. And the 24-hour entertainment district with Club 11. That may not be a club that you and I go to or would admit going to, but you know what? That's brought a whole slew of real people.
Let me tell you.
Go to Whole Foods instead because really, it's
safer.
It is safer, but I will tell you that my stepchildren go to, or used to go to, I guess you would call them rappers that would go and play at 2:00 in the morning at Club 11 on like Super Bowl weekend or some fancy event. They have a lot of young people.
No, it's become more mainstream. Yeah,
it is mainstream. Yep. And the 11, you represent the people at the 11
at the residences.
At the residences.
Right.
They've turned the brand into a real estate brand.
Right. They did an incredible job. Let me tell you, the ownership group are incredible people, very charitable, very good people. But it really takes all these types of entertainment to really build a community. And then not only did they provide the infrastructure for all of these great cultural centers of excellence, but they also provided the train station. And the train station is what's going to make World Center outdo Brickell City Center. It will outdo Brickell City Center without a doubt.
There's gridlock at Brickell City
There's
Center.
gridlock. And here you have the train station. And today you have 7 trains coming into that station. What people don't realize, that 6th Street goes directly to the Port of Miami. The Port of Miami is the largest economic generator we have in the county.
And probably the airport is the second largest.
The second largest. Absolutely. Okay. You take all your convention centers together and you add them up. They don't produce the hotel rooms demand that the port produces. Sure. So you think about the airport. What we did was something so smart. We have one train that you can take directly from getting off the airplane. And what does that train take you? It takes you right to the downtown station, right to the Port of Miami. You're going to have, within years, you're going to have over 10 million people cruising annually out of the Port of Miami.
And they're going to, and instead of having to look for an Uber or a taxi, they get right on the, presuming the conveyor belt works, which right now it doesn't.
Right.
But when you get the conveyor belt, you get right to the intermodal center, and from there you go straight to downtown.
You're straight to downtown. And you get off on 6th Street, and there's a wonderful hotel there, if you don't know it, called the Gale Miami. It's a great hotel.
You're just setting me up for these questions. This is great. I didn't even give them to you ahead of time. But Gale was
talk about the Gale. Talk about the Gale.
So the Gale was a recent project from the family office. When it was permitted, it was the 8th tallest building in the county.
Right.
And today,
how many stories is it?
It's 52 stories with 2 stories above it. But we have tall floors. We have a lot of floors. The office floors are all 14-foot ceilings. But today, I think it's number 13. So our city is dynamic. It is growing.
So talk a little bit about transportation and what you see with Live Local and some of those other issues that are coming up with certain cities saying, Live Local is great. Not in my city.
Right. Well, that's the unfortunate part. Okay. I think we have the greatest legislators in Tallahassee that we've ever had. And the concept of
business.
It's Live Local is the smartest state statute legislation I have ever seen in my life for development. Okay. And you can see that which works and that which doesn't work. Okay. California passed a law called Builder's Remedy. It doesn't work. Nobody allows it. Nobody enforces it. There's no teeth to it. So they could pass all the laws they want. Bad governance. They don't know what they're doing.
Well, that's California for you.
That's California for you. Really something else.
Why, does California have government issues? I didn't know.
Anyway, but so Live Local here.
Talk about why, like Bird Road and the Metro Rail and the buildup that they did there, why that could work in other places.
Right. That works anywhere.
You've got park residences over there.
That works anywhere. You see what happened is they had good local leadership. They had the type of people that embrace Live Local to make their community better. Okay. On Miami Beach, we have a commission that listens to the idiots. Instead of looking at what would make sense. Miami Beach has the biggest affordability problem of any municipality in Dade County. It has the worst traffic of any municipality in Dade County. Okay. But you have people on Miami Beach who are really the very small minority, but they're the ones that are most vocal. And they're the ones that are the idiots.
I don't know that they're idiots, but they're definitely the rich people who don't want other people coming
exactly.
to the neighborhood.
But
they're not the only ones. Coral Gables, I'm sure, is similar, and I'm sure there are other areas of the county that have the same thing, but there is, and we've talked about it on this show a lot. How do you build more condos and how do you build more homes that are high end in the millions, if not tens of millions of dollars? Where do you get workers if they have to drive an hour and a half from Homestead or Pembroke Pines and they can't get to work and gas is $4.50 a gallon and then you have tolls and the time it takes to get there and get back? If we don't have affordable housing for our workers, not just policemen and firemen and teachers, but all workers, how are we going to have anything other than the haves and the have-nots? And we're going to make it impossible for working people to live in our community.
David, you're 100% right. And that's what's happening in Miami Beach. It's not the Miami Beach I grew up on. The Miami Beach that I grew up in, it was a very different place. We had our police officers living next door. We had our nurses living next door. it was a community of everybody from every socioeconomic background. Okay. Miami Beach today is not that. Everybody who works on Miami Beach, not one lives on Miami Beach. Not one can afford to live on Miami Beach.
It's impossible.
It's the worst situation ever. And that's why we have such terrible traffic. You can't come into Miami Beach in the morning because all the workers are coming in.
Right.
The traffic is nonstop. You can't get off the beach at 5 o'clock because all the workers are getting off the beach.
There's no way to get off the beach or get on the beach during rush hour.
Which would say that's the antithesis.
By the way, Alton Road from 1st Street to 41st Street is an absolute nightmare.
It's a nightmare. And it's every road is a nightmare. And
actually, going down from 63rd Street is a nightmare, and going up is a nightmare.
For sure. And the biggest problem is the affordability. I have to tell you, we're a 7-generation family now, right? So it's 100 years later after my grandparents came here, started coming to South Beach, Miami Beach. And you sort of look around and I see my nephews and my great nephews and nieces, they're selling their homes on Miami Beach for $5 million, $4 million because affordability is ridiculous. And they're selling homes that really need repair that they may have paid $800,000 for or $1 million for. And they're going to Hollywood and buying beautiful homes
right.
for $1 million. Right. Okay. So they're going to Boca Raton.
And my children can't afford to buy on Miami Beach because now the starter home is $2.5 million.
Right. I'm sure. And that home you have to destroy to rebuild.
Well, yes. What I was going to say earlier was this seems like the antithesis of building community because it basically says you can afford to visit there, you can afford to live there, you can't afford to work anywhere nearby. And so how do you ever create a community?
That's why it's lacking as a community. Live Local is the greatest tools the commission and the mayor could have for Miami Beach, and yet they cease to use them. They don't use them.
Do you think the city of Miami is going to use them?
Oh, Miami embraces it. Dade County embraces it. Please, we build all over. We don't see any community as bad off as Miami Beach fighting Live Local every stretch of the way. And it's wrong.
Do you see acceptance in Broward County and Palm Beach County of Live Local? Or are you building up there?
Definitely Broward County. We're not doing anything in Palm Beach, so I can't answer that. But I think that Live Local is appreciated. I'll tell you how I look at things, okay? A community is not built by governance. It's built by the building community.
By the developers.
Right, by the developers.
Who are the ones taking the real risk.
Who takes the real risk. And a community of governance, the mayor, the commissioners, they need to work with their builders community. They need to say to them, how do we build more affordability? How do we build more for everyone? How do we deal with traffic in a serious way? How do we do these things? You don't go and say, we don't want any development. We got too much traffic. Those are people that are ignorant, unfortunately. So you sort of have to say to yourself, well, why would somebody run for politics? It's not worth the effort sometimes, but you have to because it's your community.
Well, I think it's hard to get reelected with true future vision.
Correct.
Because everybody wants what they want today. True leadership, in my opinion, is a leader who can look 20 years into the future, 30 years into the future, and say, what is the future of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach 30 years from now?
Right.
What are we going to do about sustainability? What are we going to do about traffic? What are we going to do about affordable housing? In order to have a real community 30 years from now.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's hard to sell to people today what's going to happen in the future. But I believe true leadership is leading and kind of ignoring or turning a deaf ear to a certain extent to some of the, immediate fix the pothole. Instead, look at how are we going to deal with the community 30 years
or immediate maximization of profit to say we're going to bleed everything we can out of what we've got right now and we're going to ignore the fallout in the future. We had Mayor Levine Cava on the show and she made an interesting statement to say we got to avoid doing nothing but building just a monolithic city, just nothing but super high-rise towers, because that's not how good communities are developed. There has to be a mix. There has to be a mix of affordable housing. There has to be a mix of different size housing. And it was an interesting comment because, you think about from a development perspective, how high can I go? How do I get the most FAR, which is floor area ratio, so that you can sell more? But we had Mayor Weinberg from Aventura on, and he has the Heroes Housing concept. And I said, how did you come up with that? And he just said, I was looking for something
to create an idea that was different. And they worked with Related, and they did a quasi public-private partnership. They are building a park. They're doing a school. They're giving discounts. I think it's half price to teachers and police officers within the community so they can live there and work there. Do you see any other communities like coming up with new ideas?
I'll tell you the best new idea that I saw Miami Beach come up with, and I really got to give credit to Mayor Dan Gelber and Ricky Arriola. They were truly, and David Richardson, they were true leaders when they were on the commission together.
Shout out to my former roommate, Dan Gelber.
Dan Gelber. Let me tell you, he is phenomenal. He was phenomenal, okay? And if you look at the transaction at Five Park, I mean, Five Park is the tallest and most luxurious building ever built on Miami Beach, okay? It's a treasure to have, okay? The property was zoned originally for over 1,000 units. Eventuality, what's become 200 plus units, 205 units, 210 units, because people are still combining units in that building, okay? But what came out of it was the most environmentally friendly park up and down the eastern seaboard, a 3-acre park that's capable of handling all of the rainwater for South Beach. Why? Because of what we put into the ground. What's incredible about that park is as much what's not seen under the ground as what's on top of the ground. And every single day you see people walking their kids into the children's play area, their dogs into the dog park, their children around the circle,
so
having lunch on the great lawn.
So how did you get the neighboring buildings, if you will, on West Avenue? How did you get them to buy into this concept?
Because they didn't listen to the minority idiots. They overrode them and came up with it. They had great leadership. They had a president, Dana, and other people within that whole Eileen.
Talking about Bentley Bay.
All of those presidents there said, guys, stop the nonsense.
Yeah, let's get rid of the blight on 6th Street.
Yeah, right. Let's get rid of the blight on Street.
It was blight.
It was a blight, an old hospital.
Right, which hadn't been occupied in 15 or 20 years.
Right,
10 years.
It looked like a zombie movie.
It was a zombie building.
Yeah,
hadn't been occupied in 10 years.
But I have to tell you, I used to love the fishing store. Was it Captain Harry's that was there?
The Captain Harry's was across the street where the...
And I used to love, when I was a kid, I used to ride my bike down there and get a slushie at 7-Eleven.
Yes.
7-Eleven was there for a long time too.
Yeah, but that 7-Eleven needed to go too. So
I don't think they had changed that.
So here you have to look at what happened to South Beach because of that transaction, because of the governance working with the development community. Okay, the mayor and the commissioner working with the development community.
Talk about the bridge.
So the bridge was one of the things that was absolutely necessary. So what did they say? They said, look, guys, where is the economics? We're willing to give you the tallest and most luxurious building on the beach. But what are you going to give us in return? One thing I got to tell you about your former roommate, Dan Gelber, he knew how to ask for everything, okay? And he never stopped. And Ricky Arriola was the same thing. Even today, he doesn't stop, okay? And so not only did they ask for the park, not only did they ask for the right gym equipment in the park, but a requirement was even Rosie. Rosie was the elephant that helped build Lincoln Road. So we had to reinvent Rosie and put Rosie in the park, to have a historical perspective of how Miami Beach got developed.
Right.
And they didn't know how to stop asking. So then they asked for a continuous bay walk behind the Mondrian and adjacent properties. And then they asked for the most important piece was this pedestrian bridge. And the interesting thing about the pedestrian bridge is government has been behind getting the approval for a pedestrian bridge for years. And they said it was impossible. You had to meet with all the different agencies. You had to meet with FDOT, Dade County, all the environmental communities. And then you had one of these guys on the south side who kept complaining, kept filing all sorts of notices, sending letters. We don't want this pedestrian bridge.
And the pedestrian bridge goes from north to south.
From north to south on 5th Street.
So it goes over the highway.
Over the highway. The same people who complain that we don't want any of those type of people in Miami Beach to come to Miami Beach. They're the same people that block the pedestrian bridge. They're the same people who block Metro Mover from coming to Miami Beach. We need Metro Mover desperately to come to Miami Beach. And you know what? I live in South Beach. I live south of 5th, and I know that most of my neighbors don't want. I would
say 99% of them.
You know what? But they're all wrong. They're all wrong because I ride Metro Mover when I'm downtown all the time. They're good people on Metro Mover. Okay, so Eileen Higgins goes over to the building and they start screaming and shouting at her and basically expel her from the building saying, we don't want that here. We don't want those type of people here. You know what? That's what builds a community from all socioeconomic backgrounds. They're nice people. You're not
One thing about Russell, he gives you his opinion.
I give you my opinion.
Whether you like it or not.
I'm picking up on that.
Yeah, you think so? And he has some strong opinions.
But then, gentlemen, I got to ask, and again, you're talking to two Miami Beach natives, my wife of whom is one as well. And the beach is always this interesting conversation of now the have and have nots, and then from whence we came. How does this shift? I mean, is this now saying, look, it's really going to be the private work that's going to create these? Because what you're saying about the bridge is basically saying, no, it ultimately was a private deal that made that work. That on a public basis, it didn't get legs.
I will tell you, all my life I've spent getting permitting and processes and everything else. And that process was one of the more difficult processes to ever get a permit to build a pedestrian bridge over public property that one of the neighbors did everything to fight. It was an amazing accomplishment. And it would not have happened but for government, the city manager, who is incredible. Eric Carpenter is a no-nonsense guy.
Shout out to the
Eric Carpenter.
Eric Carpenter.
A huge shout out. A huge shout out. Okay. And he's a guy who's determined to get things done. But you know what? He alone would never have gotten it done, nor would we. It was really the combination of working together. And I had a great partnership on that. I've been partners with David Martin. David Martin was really a great partner on that signature bridge. It wouldn't have happened, but for all of our efforts together with Eric Carpenter, with the city, to get this done. And it was really quite an accomplishment. Yeah.
And it sounds like it's a repetitive theme for you, Russell. I mean, the stories you've told all come to the same conclusion. It required that effort. I mean, the sort of taking a village mentality of saying, if we're not all working in the same direction, it's just not going to happen.
Well, you got to be rowing in the same. If you're in the same boat, you got to row in the same direction, or you're going to go nowhere.
Would you actually say that's substantively the biggest issue that we're facing? Is that
the biggest issue is that we don't listen. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Okay, you have the very small minority screaming the loudest, and somehow or other they get listened to. You know, when you look at North Beach, we're going to change the face of North Beach right now. We created a CRA that is going to really help build up the roads, build up the infrastructure, do everything. And we're part of it. I'll tell you, we were instrumental in getting the CRA approved for that area, but it really started with working together with the government to create the town center. What we created in North Beach is nothing different than what we did on Lincoln Road. The only difference was it was 30 years later. We were the first ones into Lincoln Road. When Lincoln Road, you couldn't walk on it in 92 and 93. We created that CRA. And the biggest contribution to that CRA was the decoupage. People don't remember, but that's just 32 years ago.
And decoupage was a condo conversion done by Crescent Heights.
Yes, it was a condo conversion done by Crescent Heights, where we took a building that was on the tax rolls for $17 million, the entire building, to where it's on the tax rolls today for $500 million.
Which creates tax revenue for the city and the county in order to do projects that they need to do elsewhere, as well as within the community here.
There's more tax revenue out of it than there was value back.
Exactly. That CRA paid for Lincoln Road to be redone the first time. That's what created Lincoln Road. And
so what do one of the things I didn't really like about North Beach was when they decided to reduce Collins Avenue from 3 lanes to 2 so that they could put parking on both sides and put some trees and the like. There's only one road going north other than Indian Creek. I mean, what do you do? How do you?
So let me tell you.
How are you going to deal with that as you develop more? Let's just, let me ask you straight out. You got more development coming. Okay. I'm not saying we shouldn't, because North Beach has long been the lost stepchild of Miami Beach for a long time, all the way from 63rd Street to 88th Street, So with the exception of places like 87 Park, my question is, how do you deal with reducing the street instead of increasing the street?
Well, the first thing we have to do is get rid of all the traffic engineers, because they have been devastating to our community. Devastating.
They can't even get the lights coordinated.
They can't get the lights coordinated. Every time, they're like the IRS. When they come in and they say, we're here to help you, run. Because unfortunately, everything they did in South Beach has been to a detriment.
One of the things we talked about with Jimmy Tate was, and we had Jimmy Tate on, Shout out to Jimmy. And we talked about AI. And one of the things we talked about with AI was the issue of lights using, learning from traffic in order to work independently in order to make sure the traffic flows better because it's in real time.
I love that, and it is in real time. So just going back to these traffic guys. I mean, they came to Commerce Street and they say, we're going to close off the exit onto Alton Road. Traffic's going to flow better. A disaster. Then they came and they said, we're going to add a light to 4th Street and Collins Ave and Alton Road. And
that is a big disaster.
The biggest disaster ever. The stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Then they go up and on 6th Street, they say, you know what? We're going to stop left-hand turns because it's going to move traffic better. A disaster. All 3 things that they said would help traffic, all disasters. So now the last thing this past 2 months is they put these speed bumps. Now, some speed bumps are good on Alton
in residential neighborhoods. They're very good.
So they put these speed bumps on 1st Street. And it's laughable because 1st Street has got the biggest potholes you could ever imagine going down.
That's right in front of your house.
Right in front of my house. Okay. You cannot ride there normally. No matter what type of car you have, you got holes all over the place. And in Washington Avenue as well. You come down Washington Avenue to go to Joe's, and we all a shout out to Steve and to Joe's because that place is classical and it's beautiful. And you know what? Now we have Motec there. I mean, we have Giorgio. I mean, it's a real beautiful community.
Shout out to Giorgio. Shout out to
Giorgio is special.
Shout out to Motec.
And Charlie. Charlie is great too. So, I mean, we have such a wonderful community, really a wonderful community. But to put speed bumps there when you can't drive on the road, you can't even get on the road. I mean, it's just so bad. And yet that's where they collect all these tax dollars, and yet they don't give anything back to South of 5th. It's literally ridiculous. Literally ridiculous. Washington Avenue, south of 5th Street, is so much worse kept than north of 5th Street. Why should north of 5th Street not have any holes and bumps in the road? And the minute you cross over to go into the richest community we have in Miami Beach, and you can't drive on the roads, and then you add speed bumps to it? There was logic to adding speed bumps on Alton Road, but there's no logic to where they added it on 1st Street.
I got to ask you as a resident there. I mean, I managed buildings south of 5th for years and years, Continuum and Murano and Yacht Club and all of that. And I'm interested in why you think there is that. I mean, all the board members I sat with, that there is this prejudice about south of 5th. I mean, despite having this massive.
No, they have a lot of voice at City Hall, though.
They do. But again, from the complaints about traffic, the complaints about road condition, the complaints about safety and
they got to lift South Point Drive. They've got to lift that up. They've been talking about that in the park for the last 10 years. They have to figure out how to lift it up without flooding all the buildings.
That park doesn't flood, and that park is beautiful. Okay.
But what about 1st Street?
I mean, First Street, we flood 2 or 3 times a year.
What about South Point Drive?
And you know what? There are places that need remediation. Okay. And South Florida, you're going to have flooding throughout South Florida. Okay. What you have to do is you have to be smart, and you have to make more deals like 5 Park. 5 Park was the smartest deal the city ever made because they had real leadership in Dan Gelber and his team. Dan was the funniest guy you ever want to meet because all the hard jobs he gave to Ricky Arriola. Told Ricky, you do this, you do that. Don't worry, I'll be there behind you, And then Ricky had to coalesce the community. Ricky had to coalesce the other commissioners.
Delegation's an art.
Yeah, it's an art. But he had David Richardson to help him, and he had some other smart commissioners to help him. But no one took leadership like Ricky Arriola, and that's a huge shout out. And it got things done. Really got things done.
And I presume Crescent Heights is still a large landowner in Miami Beach, if not the largest.
No, Crescent Heights is not really a large landowner. Yes, we do own a lot of different properties on Miami Beach. We might be the largest landowner on Alton Road. But the reality is that no one today that's alive has owned more property on Miami Beach than we have. So at one point or another, we were America's largest conversion company, and we were certainly the largest conversion company Miami Beach ever saw.
Yeah, so you're going to have to do a kiss and make up with the commission because when they see this, they ain't going to be too happy with you.
Well, no, you know what? You're probably right, but hopefully you're going to, cut it with a scissor after this discussion.
We'll take a close look. In the meantime, we are going to go back across the bridge, talk a little bit more about Miami and some other things happening over there. We're going to take a short break. In the meantime, you're watching Sun, Sand, and Sold. I'm Josh Tomey with David Haber, joined today by Russell Galbut. We'll be right back.